Welcome to our panel on prisons, police, and the death penalty. I am really excited for this session today because I believe that these discrete but intersecting issues are so important. Right now, we are in a moment where criminal justice issues are in the spotlight. Though there have been similar moments in the past, I think many people are seeing the current widespread movement in support of Black lives as a unique opportunity to make some real foundational changes to how we think about issues of crime and punishment. Today, we are joined by some wonderful people who are really doing the work to build a culture that respects the lives and rights of people who are so often caught up in our criminal justice system. I am going to have them all introduce themselves and let you know a little bit about them and their work. I do have some questions prepared, but I encourage you to please add questions to the chat. Make sure you add them to the stage chat so I can see them. I would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So we are going to start with Abe. Please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Thank you. I'm just honored to be here with all of you panelists and everybody that's watching. Good morning. My name is Abe Bonowitz. I literally got off the highway about 20 minutes ago from Terre Haute, Indiana, where yesterday we had the 5th federal execution in about 5 weeks, but about 8 weeks. Since July 14th was the first one. And these are the first federal executions that took place in 17 years. Okay, and there's a lot more that we can say about that, and I invite you to check out deathpenaltyaction.org and all that. But who am I? I'm a person who needs to support the death penalty. I was challenged on it when I went to a meeting on campus at Ohio State University, and I set out to prove those people wrong. And in setting out to prove them wrong about the death penalty, I found out that everything I thought about the issue, the truth was the opposite. That made me change my mind. And then I got involved in working with people who are actually touched by the issue. Murder victim family members, death row family members, the survivors of death row, wrongful conviction, people who have actually sent people who have to their maker, people, executioners I've organized with and for former executioners, all about putting voices of experience on the death penalty in front of people so they can come to their own conclusions from experience that most of us could never touch, right, and don't want to. So I run Death Penalty Action, and we are an organization that puts it out in front of the public and communities and help people do that themselves to get people talking and through where they stand on this issue.
Great. Hannah, you run a similar organization. Can you please tell me a little bit about that one?
Sure. Well, I'm the national manager of an organization called Conservatives Concerned about the Death Penalty, and we were founded in Montana a number of years ago, sort of organically, by a number of conservatives who were working around the state legislature there. And as we often see in state legislatures, theirs was considering a bill that would shorten the appellate process in death penalty trials. And so this group felt very strongly that the death penalty really didn't align with conservative values, and they thought that this was something that people should be cared about on the right-wing side of the aisle. And so they kind of started loosely calling themselves this. And what they found was that there was actually a lot of conservatives and libertarians and others along the right-wing spectrum who were really struggling with this issue and had never had a place to go and get credible information and places and sources that they trusted. And they really found that there was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm for organizing around this issue. And so it kept growing. And in 2013, we went national, launching at CPAC. So we've been around officially for about 7 or 8 years. During that time, we've launched over 15 state chapters across the country. We've been involved with numerous repeal campaigns, including 2 successful campaigns, one in New Hampshire last year and Colorado earlier this year. We find that the message actually really resonates with people when you really break it down according to their values. If you look at what conservatism is based upon, the underlying principles are belief in limited government, because we know that government is prone to error and inefficiency and to corruption. It's a belief in individual liberty and the need to protect the individual from an always overreaching government. It's a belief in protecting the sanctity of human life. And it's a belief in fiscal conservatism, ensuring that we use our tax dollars appropriately and that we collect them sparingly, and that when we are allocating them to programs, that those programs actually work to produce outcomes that we want to see. The death penalty fails in all of those areas. It's really not something that you can in any way stand behind. You know, if you look at the innocence issues alone, one person exonerated for every 9 executions. No one who claims to be a pro-life advocate can stand by a system that is killing innocent people in this way. When you look at the cost, it's 10 times more expensive than the next most expensive punishment. It's not a deterrent, so it's not money that's not only wasted, it's money that we're spending that could be better allocated toward programs that actually do work to deter crime in the first place. So it's a huge opportunity cost. And when you look at how it's applied, the arbitrariness, the racial bias in sentencing, it's something that I don't think anybody who claims to care about individual rights can be concerned about. If we care about individual liberty, we absolutely have to care about racism at the hands of our government. So we go around and we talk to conservatives on these grounds, and we find that we have a lot of commonality. I always say that support for the death penalty runs about a mile wide and an inch deep. I think if you simply have a conversation with people, most people can be pulled away from supporting it. And I'm a perfect example of that. I used to be a very staunch supporter of the death penalty. So in the past year alone, we've had 10 states that had Republican-sponsored bills to repeal. About 60 state Republican lawmakers were signed on across those 10 different pieces of legislation. We consistently see conservatives not only voting in favor of getting rid of the death penalty, but actually leading and championing it. So that is our work. That's kind of the part that we play in this very big movement. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Miea, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Miea Walker. I am the Criminal Justice Manager of the Policy and Advocacy Division of Forward Justice. We are a law policy strategy organization geared towards addressing racial, social, and economic justice. And we also work on various campaigns, including COVID-19 decarceration, and then also working with people that are on death row. I do want to share something that was absolutely amazing yesterday. I'm going to try really hard not to cry. So one of our campaigns was advocating for Ronnie Long. I don't know if any of you know who he is, but Ronnie Long was freed yesterday after serving 44 years for a wrongful conviction. There's this white woman who accused him of rape. And he had been in the system since like 1976. And so he walked out of prison yesterday. We had a bunch of people that were there to just love on him and just let him know, like, you know, we were in support. What I will tell you we have a lot of various campaigns, but I will tell you what's going on now is just that we're still working on decarceration efforts across the state. Like I said, we have a lawsuit against our governor because we were working diligently with various partners, not just in the state of North Carolina, but across the country, and trying to figure out ways that we can actually get our people out so that they're not dying to COVID. I will tell you that, excuse me for a minute. I lost my sister, Faye Brown. I served time with Faye Brown. Those of you who don't know me, I was incarcerated for 9 years. I lived in the dorm with Faye Brown, and she died on May 6th due to COVID. This is a woman who had been on work release, who had home leave, who had been spending time with her family. She had loved ones. And the more we continued to advocate, the more that everybody was just kind of shutting down. And we're like, no, we're not going to release her because of a crime, which is a crime that she did not commit. This was back in 1976. She was hanging out with another guy. They were doing drugs. She was in the backseat of the car. The guy got out and shot a police officer, and she was tied to that crime and had been tied to that crime and that narrative from the moment that she was arrested to the moment that she died. And so actively across the state and across the country, this is the movement that we're doing. We're working with movement partners. We are all about decarceration. We're all about amplifying the voices of people who are constantly seen as invisible and that people don't care about. And so even in light of whoever it is that's being imprisoned and in prison for several reasons, and people are looking at it as a death penalty issue, I'm an advocate. I've always been an advocate. And I think it had a lot to do, not just with my personal story, but living with people and seeing them for their true selves, not the worst mistake that they ever made in their life, right? And so I continue to fight. I'm grateful to be on this panel with all of you and to learn from you. I will tell you that this space that I'm in with all of you has just been a true blessing. Like once I got invited to this, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. Because I want to learn and I want to be able to take back to our state, to learn from you all, to figure out what other efforts that we can do to push this movement and to get our people free and home.
Thank you so much. Zuri, please tell us about your work.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Okay, so my name is Zoe Davis. I'm a reporter for Reason magazine. Reason is a libertarian magazine. So it's actually really funny to hear some other backstories about the death penalty. I similarly was very supportive of the death penalty. And when I got to college, I met some libertarians actually on campus, and they were like, okay, well, tell us why you support the death penalty. And all I could say was, because I do. So when they actually challenged me to look at the statistics, especially when it came to DNA testing and just learning about how infrequently DNA testing is done to ensure that they actually, that the state is actually killing the right person, it really shocked me. And since learning that, my views have definitely changed. And now that I report on a lot of criminal justice abuse stories, so that's death penalty, police abuse. And then I personally don't do as much reporting, but I have a lot of coworkers who do. We do prison guard abuse stories, and we're pretty good at staying on top of those as well. Once I started to see a lot of those abuses and then became more libertarian in my personal politics, I personally changed my views and realized that we're actually dealing with American citizens. On top of that, we're dealing with human beings. And it's just the narratives around the criminal justice system. It's painful to hear them, especially when you see, like, once you do one of these abuse stories, like it kind of changes you forever, which I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's really hard to hear people say things like, oh, well, just send them to prison for 30 years. And it's like, no, if we're not talking about murder really, or, you know, violent crime, like even spending 1 year in prison, it's intense. It's a terrible place to be. And it's really sad that we tolerate that treatment against people that we've deemed less than, when in reality, one, a lot of people who are in prison shouldn't even be in prison. So a lot of what I do is exoneration stories. And for a lot of our exoneration stories, we get a lot of prosecutorial misconduct, which is technically unconstitutional and illegal, but only a handful of prosecutors have ever gotten in trouble for hiding evidence, you know, for knowing that they have the wrong person and still pointing the finger to the wrong person. So it's pretty much like all-encompassing work, but definitely the death penalty work that we do, we cover a lot of the DNA testing, a lot of the prosecutorial misconduct. So earlier this year, I got to cover the story of Walter Ogrod in Pennsylvania, and just everything that could have gone wrong in that case did go wrong. So the prosecutor misled the jury about the manner of death. The investigators who investigated Walter Ogrod didn't actually record the confession. They hand wrote a false confession, you know, and it's like all these things. People hear these stories and they think it's a one-off type of thing, but it's like we do a lot of these stories in any given year. We have a lot of stories like this, and it's time to change the narrative. It's time to humanize these people, and it's time to actually do something where there's accountability and where people can leave prison and go back home to their families and their communities. So a lot of people don't realize as well that like there's such a generational impact to putting the wrong person in prison, and for putting the wrong person in prison for several decades of their life.
Mm-hmm. So my first question, and it is perfectly inspired by something that Zuri said, that this idea that we need to humanize the people that get caught up in the criminal justice system. And I think that, Miea, I would like to address this to you, I think. How do you think that normal people, sort of people who haven't thought about this issue a lot, might go about doing that? How do we sort of reach out to people that are involved? How do we start to think of them as humans, as you or I? Because I think that you, with your experience as someone formerly incarcerated, can really speak to that.
I think it has a lot to do with the power of narrative. I remember when I came home and I isolated myself probably for like the first 2 months because I know this really sounds crazy, but I felt like the whole entire state of North Carolina knew who I was. I felt very exposed and raw. And I wasn't sure how the community was going to receive me. And I know this sounds very shocking, but I wasn't even sure what the faith community would do. But because I am a woman of faith and I'm very dedicated to my church, I decided that when I came home, I wanted to do this massive campaign in reaching out to congregations across the state, because I wanted them to understand that just because we made a poor choice doesn't define who we are as an individual and as a human being. And that I am still a child of God, and I am still loved and respected. And I know that I have the for people. And so we started working. I started bringing other people. We started bringing some of my sisters who had just been released. Like, how do we change the narrative? There's a lot of people that see people that are incarcerated as you're the bad person. And we're not quite sure if we should engage with you. I mean, you'd be really shocked. There's a lot of people that a lot of my sisters were going to church. They were looking for someone to be a mentor. And some of the people that is their job. You're just embrace and love and accept to see people as who they are, help them get to where they want to be. And I remember she called me and she was like, I went to this church. And yes, it was on occasion church Miea, but she's like, I just went and asked a question and they just shut me down. And I was like, are you serious? And so then I reached out to another individual who then reached out to Reverend Barbara, and I was like, we have some big event that we can actually talk about this issue. And then many of the churches changed, and I actually presentations and stuff. When are you going to be successful and not the worst thing? Right? When are you going to stop defining us as a mistake and looking at us as predators instead of looking at us as an individual who's actually made a poor choice or to do everything possible for their life? And so to me, I think that's where I think it's the power of narrative. I think it's the power of storytelling. I also brought in, I actually had people read Brian Steve's book. I was like, Just Mercy. Have you heard about it? We talked about it. And once I said that, we started having a book club, everything started to change. But it's still a lot of guys, I live very, very racist. I mean, we just heard her share money that was free for a woman who accused him of something that he didn't do for 44 years. And we saw him walk out yesterday. I can't imagine what that was like. I know what 9 years felt for me. It felt like a lifetime. But being Miea, we need to do something different.
I need to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. I'm getting a couple messages in the chat that they can't understand all of us. And I'm not sure why that is. I believe I've turned all of your audio off when you're not speaking, but can you do that on your end as well, just in case that fixes it? Haven't gotten any messages in a second, but I know there is a delay. So I'm hoping that it is fixed. It says I'm echoing. I don't hear that at all.
Herb, can I answer that question as well?
What was that?
I was asking if I can give a response to that question as well.
Yes, you can. I'm getting a lot of. We're gonna give us one moment. Maria's gonna come over and help you. Come on. Hi. Okay. I think we should be good. Abe, please answer that question.
Thank you. So, can you hear me all right? Does that sound okay? Good. Thank you. So the question was, how do we get people connected to what I like to call voices of experience? And we actually have a program that, well, on March 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 9th, just before the shutdown happened with COVID, I was in 4 different Catholic schools in Columbus with what I like to call voices of experience on the death penalty, death row survivors, murder victim family members, families of people on death row, sharing their stories and helping these high schoolers. We spoke in those 4 days to more than 2,500 Catholic high schoolers and faculty in 4 different Catholic high schools in Columbus, and all about actually backing an effort to abolish the death penalty and support a Republican governor who's not executing people here in Ohio, and until he got a bit of a controversy, our Speaker of the House, who was suddenly waving a flag and saying, "I'm ready to back away from my longstanding support for the death penalty," thanks in large part to Hannah's work, actually. And we're just getting grassroots ready to communicate to their legislators. In any case, COVID happened, and of course, we moved it online. And we created a program. There's a Facebook page and a program called Voices of Experience on the Death Penalty. And that's what we do. It's almost weekly unless we're doing things out loud. So, for example, if you go to Death Penalty Action Facebook page and look at our videos, you'll see live streamed the vigils that we did during the execution on Wednesday and yesterday. And within that, we had the families of people on death row, families of people who've been executed, murder victim family members, among the people telling their stories briefly, but also more large. The man who was executed on Wednesday was the only Native American on death row, on federal death row. And on Thursday, we did an amazing discussion with Mark Charles. Go to markcharles.org. He is a Navajo man running for president on an independent ticket, but he gave the most incredible presentation from his own experience of how Native Americans are discounted in this country and how they were able to do what they did on Wednesday. So that's what we got to do. We got to take it online. And actually, it's been amazing to see how many more people we're reaching. I still think it's super powerful to be in person with people, but through these videos that we're creating, which y'all can see on our Facebook page, Death Penalty Action Facebook page, you can meet the voices of experience on the death penalty, and we can set it up to do it with you in your community.
Okay. I believe I can now be heard, and I hope that it sounds good. A question that was touched upon in the chat that I would like to direct towards Zuri. A lot of what you write about tends to be about cases of abuse or corruption. And I think a lot of people might end up looking at that kind of narrative in terms of, there's some bad apples, or well, Zuri wrote this wonderful article about one cop who did one thing bad. And I sort of want to address that and say, and question whether or not, is that the case, or is there something that can be done beyond, firing the one bad cop who might do something corrupt?
So definitely that's a lot of criticism that we get on our stories, which is we're just harping on this one person, and why don't we ever talk about the good things that police officers do? So let me first start by saying that police officers do a lot of good, and it's unfortunate that they are roped in with officers, and not just officers, but also prison guards and prosecutors. It's unfortunate that the good ones are roped in with the bad ones. But the problem is there are so many systems in place that allow the bad actors to remain in these positions to harm. And then additionally, there are a lot of systems in place that prevent them from facing real accountability like you and I would. So if we did something super egregious at our jobs, we would be fired very quickly. But unfortunately, for a lot of law enforcement, they have unions, they have qualified immunity. For prosecutors, they have a stronger form of immunity called absolute immunity. So basically, if you're not familiar with it by now, that means that they have a legal doctrine that protects them from certain kinds of abuses if the court determines that they needed to do it to do their job. Unfortunately, some of the abuses that courts say are justified are completely egregious, you know? So if you're beating someone up who's already in handcuffs, clearly you didn't need to beat them up to do their job. They're already in handcuffs. You don't need to do anything further. But for a lot of these bad actors, the courts will actually rule in their favor and say, no, that's actually good police work. And then after that, there's essentially nothing you can do. So it's the systems in place that thankfully, well, with the unfortunate death of George Floyd, and then Breonna Taylor and some of the other events that have happened over the summer, the criminal justice reform narrative has finally shifted towards those systems, which is nice. And then also during the protests, when we were seeing police officers brutalize anti-police brutality protesters, a lot of the unions started to get involved, and a lot of people saw the nastiness there. So I forget which state it was. I want to say New York, but that might not be the case. But there was that viral video of the officers shoving the old man, and then the other officers walking past him. And the first thing the police union said was, hey, that was totally justified. Why are people freaking out? And people were like, what the heck? That wasn't justified. So definitely it's the systems that we need to start talking about. And it's the systems that protect bad people. So long story short, but yes.
I'm muting myself, muting you. So Hannah, I wanted to ask you a question about your work when it comes to reaching conservatives on this issue, because I think a lot of the arguments that convinced me to oppose the death penalty were those sort of, you might want to say, fiscal conservative arguments that, you know, it saves money, of course, the idea of killing innocent people, the sort of, I would say, practical reasons to oppose the death penalty. Do you also feel, though, that you have a moral obligation to oppose the death penalty? Do you think that when you do your outreach with conservatives, you have to sometimes only use practical arguments when in reality you believe maybe the state shouldn't be killing people just because people don't deserve to be murdered? So please speak on that, because I think it's a really interesting sort of split within the anti-death penalty movement.
Yeah, and it is a split. You know, we have a constituency that some people believe it's morally wrong and never ethically okay to have the government kill people. And we have other people who really probably would be okay with the system if it were capable of operating in a manner they thought was fair and equitable and affordable, and just recognize government is totally incapable of producing such a system. So I don't personally typically address the topic starting from the question of morality. And there's a few reasons for that. One, when I first got into this work, I wasn't quite there, to be honest. I had kind of a progression on becoming anti-death penalty, where I first became convinced that we needed better protections for people with severe mental illness in the system. And then as I worked around that and was around the system more and more, was aghast at how it was operating in general, and just really recognize, you know, as a pretty anti-government person, I never think government is going to be capable of in any way carrying out this system, and it needs a lot more checks and balances. It operates to protect itself. It's not a system that's looking for truth. It's not a system that is really interested in true justice. It's just interested in being punitive. And so I became unilaterally anti-death penalty. And then it still probably took another year or so of working around the system for me to get to a place where I thought it was ethically wrong. And I think a lot of that was a journey for me, because I was raised Southern Baptist. My dad's a Southern Baptist minister. I came up in a church where I was told that this was not only appropriate, but necessary, that this was biblical, that this was something that we had to have. And so it took a long time for me to walk that pathway. And I think we need to be cognizant of that when we're talking to people and we're asking them to change positions on something. It's very difficult to change your mind on positions, especially in today's political climate. We are increasingly polarized. Both sides are painting the other side as the enemy. And if you give an inch, you're going to give a mile. And so you have to be cognizant of what you're asking of people. And if you're asking them to change their morality or their ethics or their religious beliefs, that's a lot bigger ask than asking them to recognize this system is heavily flawed. And no matter what you think about it in a utopian world or in a theoretical argument, you can't think that this operates appropriately or that this government is going to be capable of carrying it out in a way that would be. You know, we can't just fix it. We've tried to fix it for decades. It operates in the exact same manner. So I don't approach it in that way, but certainly those discussions do come up. And I think that when they do, they're very interesting discussions. I like to listen to the reasons why people support the death penalty before I toss a ton of data at them, because what you'll find is that people have very different reasons or no reasons at all for supporting it. So it's good to meet people where they are. But I do think that for me, you know, where I'm at now personally, I do think it's an ethical problem. And I think that, you know, it ties in to something for me that's bigger than just my organization or my political work. It really does go into an issue with American Christianity that I have, where I don't think we're teaching a consistent life ethic. I don't think we're teaching what I believe is the foundations of Christianity, which is that all people have value and worth because they are children of God. And nothing can take that away. Nothing you do can take that away. You don't have value because of anything you do. It's not canceled because of anything you do. There should always be a consistent approach to looking at how we value humans. And unfortunately, I think American Christianity often does the opposite of that and says that people are disposable and that they're, you know, if you've done this, you're too far gone. I don't think that that's consistent with what I believe politically or religiously. I think that no person is too far gone. I think that there is redemption possible for everyone. And I think we should have a system that is focused on creating those pathways for people to make restitution to society and hopefully begin that pathway through. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people from death rows. I've seen people who, even while they're still imprisoned, really start to have a transformation personally and make a tremendous difference. They come out and they can be great allies in violence prevention and in messaging and talking about these issues that we face. And so I do think that it's something that I hope we get to in this conversation, but it's not always where we start.
Thank you so much. We are approaching the end of our time slot. So I want to ask everyone, we'll go one by one, starting with, I think, Abe. What do you think the next steps are for the movement, whether that is in relation to the death penalty itself or prisons generally or criminal justice more widely? Abe.
Well, that in itself is a big question. But I would say that it is a super exciting time to be engaged on this particular issue. First, I want to announce that our organization is expanding its work to talk also about mass incarceration and these extrajudicial executions that we're seeing in the streets by police officers decided to be the judge, jury, and executioner. And people who sign up with us, you'll hear more about that soon. But much more excitedly, we are working with Representative Espaillat from New York and Representative Ayanna Pressley from Boston, Massachusetts, to introduce legislation to abolish the federal death penalty. And we've announced a campaign where there's a petition you can sign to Congress, and there's going to be opportunities for people to actually be reaching out to your own congresspersons to ask them to support this bill and support hearings on death penalty issues that are coming up in the next few weeks when Congress comes back. So on our webpage, deathpenaltyaction.org, you click on the federal death penalty stuff, and then you'll see the petition. There's a petition for individuals and also anybody that's part of a group, a club, a team, a faith community, whatever. There's an organizational sign-on letter that already almost 200 organizations have signed on. My friend Andre Alexander from the National Council of Churches says we're going to make the death penalty, abolishing the federal death penalty, a first 100 days in the new administration priority. And you can be involved. Every single person that's watching there's something to do. So go to deathpenaltyaction.org, click on the federal stuff. You'll see a whole list of what you can do at home with your own community as an individual. One of the things is getting t-shirts like this, and we've got face masks and all that, because, you know, just to dovetail on the last question, the most important thing when you're talking to somebody is find out where they're at so you can address the issue in a way that they can hear it. So you don't want to talk about what Jesus says to somebody who's talking about the money, and you don't want to talk about the money and the high cost of the death penalty with somebody who cares about what does their faith teach, and be able to share about different faiths and perspectives. And the way to learn that is from hearing these voices of experience on the death penalty. So I'm grateful to be here. Thank you all very much. And I look forward to engaging with anybody that wants to make a difference on this issue.
Great. Thank you so much. Miea, could you please go next? Miea, I'm not sure we can hear you right now. Are you muted on your side?
Why, yes, I was. Currently, right now, I'm just going to give you guys a quick overview of the campaigns that we're working on. I'm really super excited. We have our Unlock the Vote campaign. We just had an amazing hearing the other day, working to restore the rights, the voting rights for nearly 60,000 North Carolinians. Keep your fingers crossed, because this will be a massive movement. If we win, we get to like literally share that and teach other states how to do the same thing. The other thing that we're working on is our End Criminal Justice Debt. This is fight to protect the people and people of color from exploitation and the criminalization of poverty. And then our last one is our Clean Slate campaign, where we are working to remove barriers to success for reentry for people who have been caught in the criminal legal system.
Excellent. Hannah, please answer. I hope everyone can hear us. I think they can.
I think I'm unmuted. Well, we have a lot of exciting work coming up. As for those who haven't been following the campaigns very closely, Wyoming was very close to repealing last year. They fell only 4 votes shy. They passed repeal legislation through their House, and then they fell 4 votes shy in the Senate. I think that this coming year, they will have the votes they need to pass that. It's a very red legislature, very red state. But currently they have nearly half of their legislature signed on as co-sponsors for this bill. So that will be a really big win. One thing, though, we've had significant conservative support. We haven't had a Republican governor sign a piece of repeal legislation yet. And I think that that could be the first. So Wyoming is definitely a state to watch. Right behind them is Ohio, where Abe is. Ohio is just moving so fast, it'll take your breath away. A year ago, I'll be honest, we really didn't have Ohio high on our list for potential states to see repeal happen. And under the DeWine administration there's been a lot transpiring. We've seen just about every notable Republican in the state come out and make comments about the problems with the death penalty. We launched a coalition there in February. We have over 30 well-known former congressmen, former governors, former AGs, all Republicans who have come out against the death penalty. So it's very exciting. They've paused executions. I think Ohio could repeal in the next year, maybe 2 tops, but it's coming quick. And that will be a really big domino falling in this piece, because they are the 3rd largest death row in the country. They are in the camp of traditionally being a very high usage state. And so I think that that will be a significant sign in what's happening in the death penalty repeal movement. And I think that it could have a big impact regionally as well.
Thank you so much. And last up, we have Zuri.
All right. So sorry to mention the presidential election, but definitely as Americans and as voters, we all have a responsibility to make sure that criminal justice reform, that the support for it now doesn't fade away after the election. Obviously, the 2 major parties represent both sides of a lot of the issues in the criminal justice system. And it's our responsibility to make sure that regardless of whoever wins, that it's still an issue that we're talking about, that people in Congress are talking about it. A lot of times, criminal justice reform comes up during election years, but after the election year, no one really touches it ever again. And that's definitely something to be mindful of. So sharing stories, sharing abuse stories, that's like a very small thing that you can do to make sure that people are still having that criminal justice reform is still in the conversation.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this panel. I think that this was one of the most talked about before the conference, so I hope all of the attendees really enjoyed it. Please, everyone who mentioned links to campaigns and events or anything else, social media, drop them in the chat now so that all of our attendees can grab them. Thank you so much. I am going to kick you all out of the stage so that we can get set up for our next panel. Thank you all so much. Goodbye.